She paid $6,000 to keep her family warm, then her mother called her selfish. In front of everyone, Jasmine Wells was 31 years old, and she knew, down to the last decimal, exactly what unconditional love had cost her: $6,143, not counting the late fees, not counting the emergency reconnect charges, not counting the nights she lay awake in Milwaukee, quietly checking whether her parents' house in Madison still had heat. She was sitting at their dining table when it happened, glass of iced tea in her hand, smile still trying to exist on her face. Her mother, Ruth, looked across the room at her in front of cousins, relatives, everyone, and said it like it was nothing, like it was funny. You could do more if you weren't so selfish. And every fork in that room stopped. Jasmine felt it before she heard it. That specific kind of silence that only happens when someone has just been publicly humiliated. And everyone at the table knows it, and no one is going to say a word. Her father stared down at his roast chicken like the answer was somewhere in the bones. Her brother Alex let out a small laugh under his breath, not loud enough to own it, just loud enough to enjoy it. She looked at her mother, then she looked up at the ceiling lights glowing softly above them. Those lights, the ones she had paid for, month after month after month, while Ruth sent texts that said things like, "Just this once, honey, we're a little short again. Family helps family." Jasmine didn't scream, she didn't cry. She raised her glass just high enough for the ice to clink and said, quietly, "You'll notice my selfishness when the lights go out." Ruth's smile disappeared so fast it almost looked like fear. But to understand what happened next, you need to go back to where this really started. It was a Tuesday night in winter, 10:43 p.m. Jasmine remembered the exact time because she had been sitting at her kitchen island in Milwaukee, laptop open, reviewing a heating efficiency proposal for a hospital wing, when her phone lit up. "Mom?" Ruth's voice on the other end sounded small, almost embarrassed. "Almost. We just need a little help until your father's pension adjustment comes through." Jasmine asked how much. Ruth hesitated. $480. Jasmine paid it in 10 minutes. She didn't ask why the bill had gotten that high. She didn't ask why Alex, who lived 15 minutes from their parents, hadn't been called first. She told herself this was what a good daughter did. She was wrong. The next month, it was the gas bill, then the water, then the internet. Because Ruth said her church meetings had moved online and her father needed streaming to keep his mind sharp. Then the electric again, higher this time. By spring, the numbers had become too heavy to hold in her head. So Jasmine did what she did at work. She made a spreadsheet, because numbers are easier to look at than feelings. Electric, 1,8 for 2, gas, 1,376, water, 711, internet and phone bundle, 1,190, reconnect fees, late charges, same-day emergency payments. The rest. She was a senior facilities energy analyst. She spent her days studying consumption reports for office towers, hospitals, warehouses. She could identify a leaking heat loop from a spreadsheet. She could tell when a building was hemorrhaging money before anyone else even noticed. And yet, she had spent an entire year ignoring the biggest energy drain in her own life, because the people causing it shared her last name. What the family didn't know was that after the fourth emergency payment, Jasmine started saving everything: screenshots, voicemail recordings, bank confirmations, even the texts. The one where Ruth wrote, "Don't tell your father how much I'm asking. He'll feel ashamed," followed 2 days later by, "Alex says you make more than enough, so I don't know why you're making this difficult." She didn't save them for revenge. At least, that's what she told herself. She saved them because somewhere deep down, she already knew they would deny it when the time came. They would look her in the eyes and deny every single dollar. On the drive to Madison for dinner that night, she had almost decided to say nothing. The highway was dark, rain against the windshield. Ruth had texted 3 times asking if Jasmine could quietly take care of the electric before dessert, because the account was being weird again. Jasmine stared at that message at a red light. Then she looked at the passenger seat. Sitting there, wrapped in brown paper and a blue ribbon, was a ceramic serving bowl she had made by hand. Weekend pottery class. Hours of smoothing the rim. She'd glazed it soft blue because Ruth always said blue made a house feel calm. She had made something with her bare hands and brought it as a gift. She sat at that red light for a long moment. Maybe this dinner could be different. Maybe Ruth would see the bowl and remember that Jasmine wasn't just a number on a bank account. Maybe her father would ask about her promotion interview. Maybe Alex would show up with something other than an excuse. The light turned green. She exhaled and drove. When she arrived, her father looked up and said, "You made it," like she was a package being delivered. Alex leaned against the doorframe and grinned. Big city money is here. Then laughed when nobody else did. Before Jasmine had even taken off her coat, Ruth pulled her aside and murmured close to her ear, "Please don't bring up the bills in front of people. It makes us look irresponsible." Jasmine looked at her mother's careful makeup, the pearl earrings, the polished, practiced smile, already prepared for the relatives in the next room. And something cold moved through her chest. Ruth didn't mind taking the money. She only minded witnesses. The ceramic bowl sat on the counter all night, half hidden behind a stack of store-bought pies. Ruth had barely glanced at it when Jasmine arrived. Dinner was its own kind of theater. Ruth praised Alex for stepping up lately because he had fixed a loose cabinet hinge. Her father bragged that Alex always came when called. Alex complained about property taxes and said, casually, like a blade slipped between ribs, "Some of us don't have the luxury of living alone with no real responsibilities." Jasmine's hand tightened around her fork. She thought about her rent, her student loans, her car insurance, retirement contributions, medical bills, the second job she had quietly taken, 3 months of weekend energy audits, just to make sure her parents' house wouldn't go dark. She nearly spoke, but Ruth got there first. "Jasmine has done well," her mother said, smiling warmly at the table. "But she could do more. If she weren't so selfish." 1 second of absolute stillness. Then Jasmine set down her glass. "You'll notice my selfishness when the lights go out." Ruth's eyes flicked to the ceiling fixture, then back to her daughter. Alex leaned back with a sharp laugh. "Wow, threatening mom and dad now. Real classy." Jasmine turned her phone face up beside her plate. "No," she said. Her voice was calm. Completely, terrifyingly calm. "I'm done letting you call my help, love, when you receive it. And selfishness, when I stop." Ruth's cheeks tightened. "This is not the place." Jasmine looked slowly around the table. To the cousins, the relatives, the people who had watched her grow up, the people who had accepted Ruth's version of this family for years. Alex, the busy, devoted father. Ruth, the long-suffering, selfless mother. Jasmine, the distant daughter with money who never came home enough. "Actually," Jasmine said, "this is exactly the place, because the insult was public. So the truth can be public too." Her father finally looked up. "Jasmine," he said, a warning, but his voice had nothing behind it. Jasmine tapped her phone. The first screenshot filled the screen in plain, unmistakable text. She read it aloud. "Can you pay the electric before noon? Don't ask Alex. He's stressed. And you know you're better with money." A cousin at the far end of the table shifted in his chair. Ruth whispered, "Stop." Jasmine swiped. "Gas company again. Your father doesn't need to know. Please just handle it." Another swipe. "Internet is due. I told Alex not to worry, because you always come through." Alex's smile vanished. "You're really doing this?" he snapped. "Yes," Jasmine said simply, and she opened the voice memo. Ruth's voice came through the speaker, thin, quiet, unmistakable. "Honey, I know it sounds like a lot, but what else are we supposed to do? Alex has children. You only have yourself." The room went silent. Not peaceful, not shocked, exposed. Ruth reached across the table as if she might grab the phone. Jasmine moved it back, without looking at her. "There's more," she said. 12 months, $6,143. I have every receipt." Her father swallowed. "Your mother said you helped with a few small things." Jasmine turned to him slowly. "Dad, your house stayed warm last winter because I paid the gas bill. In February, and March, and April, while you sat by that heater and had no idea." He didn't speak for a long moment. He simply looked at his daughter, like he was seeing something he had refused to see for a very long time. The bowl was still on the counter, still wrapped, still untouched. Jasmine stood, buttoned her coat, and picked it up on her way out. She had made it with her own hands, and she would take it home. She didn't slam the door. She didn't need to. Some exits don't require noise, they just require the lights going out behind you. And they did. Her father's voice cracked on her name, and that somehow was the thing that almost broke her. Almost. Your light stayed on, Jasmine said, her voice barely above a murmur. Because I paid that electric bill 5 times. Your internet stayed connected because mom said your blood pressure appointments needed online access. I didn't embarrass you. Dad, I protected you. Ruth's response came fast. Too fast, like she'd been holding it like a weapon. You protected us. By humiliating me at my own table. Jasmine felt her throat tighten, but her voice stayed completely eerily calm. No. Mom, I protected you in private. You humiliated me in public. The difference between those 2 sentences landed on that table like a verdict. Nobody moved. Alex shoved his chair back. This is insane. You're acting like some kind of victim. Nobody forced you to pay anything. Jasmine looked at her brother and nodded once. You're right. Nobody forced me. You trained me. That landed harder than any scream ever could. Aunt Linda, who had stayed silent through all of it, hands folded in her lap like a woman at a funeral, finally spoke. Maybe we should all just calm down. Jasmine, you're not wrong, but don't make it bigger than it needs to be. Jasmine turned toward her slowly. Aunt Linda, with respect, people like you saying don't make it bigger are exactly why it got this big. Everyone at this table saw it. Everyone benefited from the quiet version of me. Not one person objected. Until I started speaking. Linda looked down at her plate. She didn't argue. She couldn't. Ruth shifted tactics so quickly. Jasmine almost admired it. The anger dissolved in its place. Wounded dignity, a trembling hand pressed to the chest, a voice that suddenly sounded fragile. After everything I sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me. Jasmine studied her mother's face for a long moment. The performance was flawless. It always had been. Did you sacrifice for me, Mom? The question came out quiet, almost gentle. Or for the picture of a perfect family you could show the neighbors. The color drained from Ruth's face. The dinner had stopped being a dinner. It had become a courtroom without a judge. And Jasmine had stopped acting like the defendant. Ruth stood at the head of the table, one hand pressed to her chest, the other gripping the chair back like she needed something solid. You have no idea what it takes to hold this family together. I remember every birthday. I host every dinner. I am the one people call when something breaks. Jasmine almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because Ruth genuinely believed that the performance of care was the same thing as care itself. And who did you call? Jasmine asked softly. When the house was about to go dark, Ruth's mouth opened, then closed. Alex stepped in, eager, clumsy, desperate to rescue her. You make good money. Why are you acting like $6,000 ruined your life? Jasmine turned her phone toward him and opened another folder. Because it wasn't just $6,000. It was the Thanksgiving, when Mom told me not to come unless I could bring grocery money. It was Dad's medication copay that somehow became my responsibility. The same month you bought a new grill. It was your son's school fundraiser where Mom wrote my name on the donor form before she asked me. It was every time this family decided that my independence meant I didn't need support, only demands. Alex's wife, Megan, had been staring at her plate for the last 10 minutes. She muttered it without looking up. We all have problems. Jasmine looked at her, tired, but completely steady. Then solve yours. Without assigning them to me. Someone inhaled sharply across the table. Alex's finger came up. Don't talk to my wife like then don't let your wife text me last month, Jasmine said, asking me to cover your water bill. Because she didn't want your kids visiting their grandparents in a cold house. The finger dropped. You all use the same script. Jasmine said. Her voice wasn't angry now. It was something worse than angry. It was clear. Mom used guilt. Dad used silence. You used your children. And I kept paying. Because I thought love meant preventing consequences. Her father looked smaller with every sentence, like air was slowly leaving him. He rubbed his forehead and said, in a voice Jasmine barely recognized, I didn't know. It was that much. Ruth snapped toward him instantly. Don't you start. And in that split second, that reflex, Jasmine saw everything. Ruth wasn't afraid of poverty in that moment. She was afraid of losing control over the story. For years, she had whispered to relatives that Jasmine was successful but distant, generous but difficult, loving but cold. Those little phrases had built a cage around Jasmine, and everyone had mistaken the cage for her personality. Jasmine picked up her glass, not to toast, just to keep her hands from shaking. "Here is what happens now," she said. The table went absolutely still. "Tonight, I am removing my card from every utility account. I am changing every login I created. I am canceling every automatic payment. If you need help, genuine help, you can make a written budget. Show me where the money actually goes. Ask me respectfully. But the emergency daughter service is permanently closed." Ruth's face hardened into something Jasmine had never quite seen before. "You would let your own parents sit in the dark?" Jasmine's answer came without a single pause. "No, Mom. You did that. By ignoring every bill until I rescued you. I'm just not standing between you and the consequences anymore." Alex laughed. That bitter, hollow laugh of a man who has nothing left. "Good luck explaining that to people." Jasmine looked around the table one last time. "I just did." Her cousin Brian had been quiet in the corner. Now, Jasmine noticed his phone screen light up, his fingers moving. Within seconds, phones around the table began to buzz, one by one, like a chain reaction. Someone in the family group chat had written, "Is it true Jasmine paid their utilities all year?" Another message appeared immediately beneath it. "Ruth told us Jasmine never helps." Ruth lunged for her own phone, reading fast, her face tightening with each notification. The public image she had spent years carefully constructing was cracking in real time, not because Jasmine had screamed, not because Jasmine had threatened anyone, but because Jasmine had simply brought receipts. "Delete those," Ruth hissed. Jasmine shook her head. "No." Alex grabbed his coat. "We're leaving." Ruth spun toward him. "You are not leaving me in the middle of." Alex, Megan's voice, low, quiet. She nodded toward the den where their kids were loud over a tablet, sticky-fingered and oblivious. Alex looked at Jasmine, a long, complicated look as if he was waiting for her to do something. "Step in. Smooth it over. Be the one who fixes it." She didn't move. She simply folded her napkin, placed it beside her plate. That small, quiet motion seemed to offend him more than anything else she had said all night, because he finally understood. There was no one left to clean this up. And then Jasmine's phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, assumed it was another utility alert, another family text spiraling in the background. But the name on the screen made her stop. Marin Patel, Regional Director, Northline Energy Systems. She opened it under the table, and the first line stopped her breath completely. "We are pleased to offer you the position of Regional Director of Building Performance Chicago Office." Chicago. The job she had interviewed for 2 weeks ago. The job she had almost talked herself out of applying for, because Ruth had been dropping hints for months that Jasmine should consider moving closer to Madison. "Now that your father and I are getting older." Jasmine, read the email again, every word bright and solid against the noise around her. "Higher salary, leadership role, relocation package, a company apartment. For the first 2 months, a start date in 6 weeks." She felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't realized had been locked tight for a very long time. Ruth was still talking, the words blurred at the edges. "Ungrateful, dramatic. After everything I've done." Jasmine stood, the chair legs scraped the floor, every head turned. "I just got promoted," she said. The sentence confused them more than all the evidence combined. Her father blinked. "What?" Jasmine held up the phone. "Regional Director, Chicago Office." For the first time all night, no one had a prepared response. Ruth's face moved through surprise, then calculation, then something very close to panic. All in the span of 3 seconds, Jasmine watched the whole pattern of her childhood play out in her mother's expression. "Chicago?" Ruth repeated. "That's farther." Jasmine looked at her mother for a long, quiet moment and smiled, not with triumph, with peace. "Yes," she said, "it is." She picked up her coat. She picked up the ceramic bowl still wrapped, still untouched, still blue. She had made it with her own hands. She would take it somewhere. It would be seen. She walked to the front door. She didn't look back, not because she was cruel, but because she had spent 31 years looking back, checking, worrying, rescuing, and the only thing it had ever cost her was herself. The door closed quietly behind her. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. Her phone glowed with the offer letter in her hand. Chicago. 6 weeks. A new life. And somewhere behind her, in that warm dining room with its glowing lights, a family was finally sitting in the truth. She had lit up for them. She had kept their lights on for a year. It was time to finally turn hers on. Alex's voice cut through the room like he'd been waiting to use it. You think you're too important for us now? Jasmine looked at him, then at Ruth, and said the thing she had been quietly assembling in her mind for 12 months. No, this is about the fact that I almost turned the job down. Because I thought being available to this family made me a good person. Tonight showed me the truth. Being available to people who only value your access isn't goodness, it's self-abandonment. The word hung in the air. Self-abandonment. Nobody argued with it, because somewhere in that room, every single person knew it was true. Ruth took a step toward her. Her voice had shifted again, softer now, almost maternal, almost gentle. The version of herself she deployed when everything else had failed. Jasmine, don't make a major life decision while you're this upset. That nearly broke Jasmine's composure. Nearly. She thought about every PM phone call, every urgent text about a bill that had been ignored for weeks, every manufactured crisis that somehow required an immediate response from her. And now her career was the impulsive thing. I made this decision before dinner, Jasmine said quietly. I just didn't know it yet. Her father rose from his chair slowly, like a man carrying something heavy he'd pretended wasn't there. Honey, we're proud of you. Jasmine looked at him, really, looked at him, searching for the warmth she had spent 31 years hoping to find permanently. The words were right. They had always known the right words, but they came too late and landed to hollow, like a receipt printed after the store had already closed. Are you proud? She asked. Her voice wasn't accusing. It was just honest. Or are you scared that I'll be harder to reach? He looked away. That look, that single, quiet sideways glance, was the only answer she needed. Then Ruth spoke, and what she said next exposed everything. Not with cruelty, not with manipulation, just with 4 words that slipped out before she could stop them. What are we supposed to do about the bills? Silence. Not the shocked kind, the revealing kind. Not, will we still see you? Not, are you okay? Not, how did we make you feel this alone for so long? The bills, always the bills. Jasmine laughed once, softly, sadly. There it is. Ruth seemed to hear herself, truly hear herself. For the first time all night, her eyes filled. I didn't mean it like that. Jasmine put her phone in her purse. You did. Mom, you just usually hide it better around them. The dinner was quietly dissolving. Relatives gathered, coats with the careful, deliberate movements of people trying not to draw attention to themselves. Aunt Linda avoided Ruth's eyes entirely. Cousin Brian muttered something about an early morning. Megan was in the den, her voice low and strained, trying to convince 2 exhausted children to put on their shoes while Alex stood uselessly in the doorway, red-faced, angry, and suddenly very aware that no one was coming to rescue him from the mess he had helped build. The perfect family dinner Ruth had so carefully staged was collapsing into cold food, unfinished plates, and whispered conversations that would outlast this night by years. Jasmine walked to the counter. She picked up the ceramic bowl, still wrapped, still blue, still untouched. For a moment, she considered leaving it there as evidence that she had come with love, that she had always come with love. Then she tucked it under her arm. Ruth noticed immediately. You're taking my gift? Jasmine turned at the door. It was never yours. You didn't even open it. Ruth flinched like she'd been struck, and Jasmine waited for satisfaction to arrive. It didn't. That surprised her more than anything else that had happened. Tonight, she had imagined that revenge would feel hot, cinematic, triumphant. Instead, it felt clean and quiet and aching, like removing a splinter that had been buried so deep for so long that the skin had grown around it. By 9:17 p.m., Jasmine was sitting in her car in the driveway, engine running, heater, blowing warm air against her hands. She opened the electric account on her phone, removed her card, changed the recovery email, downloaded the final payment, confirmation, then gas, then water, then internet. Each click was small, almost boring, taken alone, but together. One after another, they were redrawing a boundary her family had spent years quietly, carefully erasing. Through the front window, she could see Ruth moving through the house from room to room, while relatives carefully stepped around her. Alex was crouched near the hallway, trying to zip his youngest child's jacket while the other one cried because no one had packed the tablet charger. Megan stood near the wall with her arms crossed, jaw tight. For once, Jasmine did not open the car door. Her phone rang. Mom. She let it go too. Voicemail, then Dad, then Alex, then Mom again. She watched the calls stack up on her screen the exact same way the bills once had, urgent only because someone had refused to handle them earlier. A text from Ruth appeared. Please come back inside. We need to talk like family. Jasmine started typing. Family does not mean access without respect. She stopped. Read it back. She wasn't checking if it was strong enough. She was checking whether it was cruel wearing the mask of truth. It wasn't. She sent it. 60 seconds later, the porch light came on. Ruth stepped outside without a coat, arms wrapped tight around herself against the cold she had walked into voluntarily. Jasmine lowered her window halfway. Ruth's makeup had smudged beneath one eye. For the first time in Jasmine's memory, her mother did not look like a woman who could control a room with a single expression. She just looked like someone standing in the cold. I'm sorry, Ruth said. Jasmine waited, because Ruth always had a second sentence, a condition, a pivot. Ruth swallowed. Not because people know. I mean, I hate that they know, but I'm sorry. Because you were right. I made you responsible for things you should never have had to carry. Jasmine studied her mother's face in the porch light, wanting to believe her, and refusing firmly, carefully to confuse wanting with proof. Why now? She asked. Why tonight, and not any of the other times? Ruth looked back at the glowing house behind her. The warm light in the windows, because when everyone started asking questions, I wanted to blame you. I really did. And then Alex asked me if you were still covering next month. And I heard how it sounded, out loud, for the first time. Jasmine's eyes burned. She did not let the tears fall. It sounded ugly. Because it was ugly. Ruth nodded. Yes, one word, the smallest word in the English language. But it was the first, completely honest thing Ruth had said all night. And Jasmine felt it land somewhere deep. Not as forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not for a long time, but as something. A crack of light under a door that had been shut for years. Her father appeared on the porch a moment later, moving carefully down the steps. He stopped at the passenger window, looked at his daughter through the glass, and didn't perform anything. Didn't reach for the right words, just looked at her with the tired, unguarded face of a man who had let someone else's silence become his own for too long. Jasmine looked at both of them, standing in the cold they had chosen to walk into. She thought about the February gas bill, the March gas bill, the April gas bill, the 10:43 p.m. phone call in the dark, the spreadsheet, the voicemails, the bowl. She thought about Chicago, 6 weeks, a new title, a life-shaped space waiting to be filled by her, on her own terms, in her own time. She rolled the window back up, not as punishment, not as a final word, just because the night was cold, and she was finally, for the first time in a very long time, warm enough on her own. She put the car in reverse. The headlights swept across the front of the house as she turned, and for just a moment, the whole house glowed in her light. She had spent a year keeping their world illuminated. Tonight, she finally pointed the light forward, toward herself, and drove. Her father came down those porch steps, slowly, half-buttoned coat, cold air hitting his face. He stopped at her window and looked at his daughter, like a man confronting a mirror he had been avoiding for years. I should have asked more questions, he said. No. Performance. No deflection, Just that, Jasmine held his gaze. Yes, you should have. He winced. But he didn't argue. And that small, quiet acceptance of pain he had earned mattered more than she expected it to. Then the front door opened behind them. Alex, a child balanced on one hip, expression still tight with the particular anger of a man who had never once been held accountable and didn't understand why tonight was different. So what? He said. We're all supposed to beg now? Jasmine looked past her parents, directly at him. No, you're supposed to parent your children, pay your own bills, and stop using Mom as a messenger when you want money from me, but you're too proud to ask yourself. Behind Alex, Megan whispered his name, sharp, warning. His face flushed dark. Then something happened that Jasmine had genuinely never seen before in 31 years. Ruth turned around and looked at her son. Alex, enough. Not a suggestion, not a gentle redirection, a boundary from Ruth, directed at Alex. The porch went completely silent. Alex stared at his mother, like the ground had shifted beneath him. You're taking her side? Ruth's shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but in the exhaustion of someone finally setting down something very heavy. I'm taking responsibility. That was the moment. Not the screenshots, not the receipts, not the voicemail played at the dinner table. This, Ruth, standing in the cold she had walked into, without a coat, choosing honesty over image, for the first time. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't repair. It was something smaller and more fragile than both of those things. It was the faint, tentative possibility that truth had finally cost the right people something. Ruth had lost face in front of everyone she had carefully managed for years. Alex had lost the invisible armor of being the son who could do nothing wrong. Her father had lost the comfort of mistaking silence for innocence. And Jasmine had lost the illusion that being needed was the same as being loved. I'm driving back to Milwaukee tonight, she said. Ruth's face crumpled. Tonight? Yes. And I'm accepting Chicago. If you want to see me plan a visit, ask in advance, and understand that no is a complete answer, all by itself, without an explanation attached. Ruth wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Will you ever forgive me? Jasmine looked at the house behind her. The lit windows, the warm golden glow she had quietly, faithfully paid to keep on month after month, while being called selfish for not doing more. Maybe, she said, but forgiveness won't come with autopay. She did not go back inside. She did not help clear the plates. She did not pack leftovers into foil, or settle the children, or sit with Ruth at the kitchen table, absorbing her guilt until Ruth felt better. She had done that her whole life, soaking up other people's discomfort so they wouldn't have to feel it. Not tonight. She placed the blue bowl carefully on the back seat, checked that her overnight bag was zipped, and stood beside the car, while Ruth hovered near the porch steps, wanting a hug, visibly wanting one but knowing, somehow, that she hadn't earned the old kind. Jasmine walked over anyway. She hugged her mother, not with the desperate, searching closeness of a daughter trying to finally be chosen, but with the quiet, careful compassion of a woman who had chosen herself first. Ruth held on to tightly. Jasmine gently stepped back. I forgive you enough not to hate you, she said. But forgiveness doesn't mean I go back to being someone you can drain and dismiss whenever it's convenient. Ruth covered her mouth, crying silently, without performance. Maybe, for the first time, behind her, through the window, Alex was arguing with Megan. One of his kids was wailing about a missing mitten. The sound would have pulled Jasmine inside once. Her feet would have already been moving toward it. Tonight, it only confirmed something she hadn't been able to name until now. She had been trained carefully, consistently, over decades, to run toward other people's chaos and away from her own peace. Her father came down the steps one more time. He was holding a folded piece of paper. It's the pension statement, he said quietly, and our checking balance. Not because I'm asking you to fix it, because I should have known where we stood a long time ago. Jasmine looked at the paper in his hand. Then she took it and handed it back. Look at it with Mom tomorrow. Make a plan, without me in it, first. He nodded, ashamed, but listening. That was all she could ask for right now, and somehow, it was enough. The drive out of Madison was quiet in a way that felt different from all the quiet drives before it. Not heavy, not guilty, just still. T the first red light, her phone buzzed, and Linda, I'm sorry I stayed quiet tonight. You were brave. Jasmine stared at the message for a long moment, then typed. Being brave should not be a requirement for being treated fairly. She sent it, placed the phone face down, and exhaled. Snow had started to fall, soft and thin, catching in the headlights like sparks. By the time she reached the highway, Madison's glow had disappeared behind her, and for the first time in years, Jasmine did not feel guilty for leaving it there. The next morning, Ruth called once. Jasmine didn't answer immediately. She waited until the coffee was ready, until sunlight was coming through her apartment window, until she was sitting in her own space, on her own terms, in her own quiet. Then she called back. Ruth didn't ask about the bills first. She said, I opened the spreadsheet you sent last month. I should have opened it. Then, Jasmine closed her eyes. It wasn't enough. It wasn't repair, but it was a beginning that didn't require Jasmine to bleed for it, and that was new. 3 weeks later, she accepted Chicago officially. 6 weeks after that, she moved into a small apartment with tall windows and winter bare trees lining the street below. On her first night there, she unpacked one thing before anything else, the blue ceramic bowl. She placed it at the center of her own dining table and filled it with oranges. 2 days later, Ruth sent a photo, a utility bill, paid in full, one sentence beneath it. We handled it. Jasmine smiled, not because everything was fixed, not because the past had been erased, but because the weight had finally landed where it belonged. Here is what Jasmine carried with her into that new life, a truth that took her 31 years and $6,000 to fully understand. Family is not a place where one person proves their love by sacrificing without limit. Real love doesn't need you to disappear into it. When you stay silent long enough, you stop keeping the peace. You start teaching people exactly how to take from you without gratitude. Saying no doesn't destroy a healthy relationship. It reveals whether the relationship was ever healthy at all. Jasmine didn't win because her parents struggled. She didn't win because Alex had to stand in his own mess for once. She won because she stopped mistaking guilt for love. She won because she finally understood that being useful is not the same as being valued. On a cold gray morning, her plane lifted off the ground. Chicago spread out below her, vast and indifferent and full of possibility. She looked down at the streets growing smaller and smiled softly, without triumph, without bitterness, just peace. Not because the lights had gone out behind her, but because for the first time in 31 years, hers had finally come back on.